Welcome back to America Decides. Congresswoman Victoria Spartz is the latest Republican lawmaker to come face-to-face with some constituents none too pleased about what's going on in Washington. She experienced this at a town hall she hosted over the weekend. Here's one of the statements she made that incited, well, kind of a less than rapturous response from the crowd.
What President Trump did it last time when he tried. If you seek asylum, wait in the other country. There is no due process if you don't even legal evidence. You violated the law. Period.
Talking about immigration, a lot of cacophony back and forth. That's sort of indicative of where things were. I want to bring in our political panel, Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent for Semafor, and Reese Gorman, politics reporter at NOTUS. Remember, NOTUS News of the U.S. Shelby, we'll get to that sort of stuff there in a minute, but I want to talk to you about your reporting under the heading of Fight Club mentality within the Trump White House. What does that mean, and what does that suggest about what will or will not happen in the aftermath of the controversy last week about the Signal group chat and attack plans in Yemen?
Well, the Trump 1.0 administration, we saw a lot of firings. People, it was sort of a revolving door.
I was there every day. They came fast and furious.
Exactly. They came, they went. This time around, it's very different. The president has not really fired anybody, and part of the reason is internally they have a no scalps policy, which is the idea that the Trump administration believes that the more Democrats and Trump opponents want somebody to get fired over anything, whether it is Signalgate or elsewhere, the more resistant the administration is to do that. And they have taken a lesson from the Trump 1.0 administration, and they feel actually that they made mistakes in the first Trump administration, that they let people go too easily, and it sort of emboldened their opponents. And so what we're seeing here is that resistance. And the more we hear calls for Mike Waltz to resign, the more unlikely it is at this moment.
And there's a lot of reporting that speculates about is Mike Waltz up or down. You get various reads on that. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, talked about that today. Let's listen.
Mike Waltz continues to be an important part of his national security team, and this case has been closed here at the White House as far as we are concerned. There have been steps made to ensure that something like that can obviously never happen again, and we're moving forward.
What does that tell you?
I think that's very interesting that she said specifically that she said the case has been closed, because we really haven't heard exactly what happened. We've heard a lot of rumors. Clearly, Mike Waltz, according to those screenshots, added the reporter to the group chat inadvertently. But I think it shows that the White House wants to get past this. They are done talking about it. They're considering the point moot, no matter how much the constituents or Democrats or, quite frankly, some Republicans call for more investigations into it.
Reese, you also have reporting on this important week ahead for Senate Republicans, House Republicans. And ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, on this program in the not-too-distant future, we're going to do kind of a drill down on what reconciliation is, why that process matters. But that's not what we're going to do right here. What we're just going to talk about is where the Senate and House Republicans are on a budget resolution, this broader framework. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so if you remember, the Senate passed the first of their two-bill strategy earlier in the year. The House then said they couldn't do two bills, so they passed their one-bill budget. And now they have to come to a compromise. So the Senate is working on their one-bill compromise. Sources tell us, as I reported today, that this could happen, be adopted as early as Wednesday. It could also run into Friday, Saturday with some vote-a-ramas, which is where they just vote on a bunch of amendments throughout the night and can go till 3, 4 in the morning.
It's not nearly as fun as it sounds.
Not in the slightest, actually. And so basically, they're just trying to come to a compromise budget on this one-bill strategy that they can then send back to the House. Now, they are pretty far apart. There are a lot of cuts that some of the senators are not comfortable with. Senators also want to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, which is going to cost a lot more money. House does not believe they can do that because there's some House members that say that the bill has to pay for itself, which would mean cutting Medicaid, cutting some entitlements, which is also something that Trump himself has said that he doesn't want. So there's quite a ways away right now on this, and they're still like on the easiest part, which is the budget. There's not even any policy attached to this yet.
And Reese, let's talk about something that's also part of these dialogues that the audience will grasp onto, because it carries with it the specter of a default. Debt ceiling.
Yes.
Is it going to be in there or not? And if it isn't, how is that going to be resolved? Because that overhangs a lot of what may or may become of the Trump agenda and economic volatility in the markets.
So the debt ceiling, I mean, right now the House, my reporting has showed, which I think I reported last month, was that Mike Johnson does want this in there. He does want debt ceiling in there because He believes that if he could sweeten it up with just all the say, oh, you're going to vote against reconciliation because of debt ceiling, well, you're also going to be voting against budget, and then how can Republicans go back and run on that? So he's trying to just get it out of the way, thinks this will be easy. But if you remember, there's a handful of members who have never voted for a debt ceiling increase.
House and Senate.
And Republican members, that is. And so a lot of times, I mean, if you remember 2 years ago, Kevin McCarthy, he needed Democrats. More Democrats voted for it than Republicans did. And that was a pretty conservative debt ceiling hike that had some cuts into it. And so this one, if you're just going to throw a clean debt ceiling hike into it and expect no Democrat help, which is reconciliation is purely partisan,
sure,
that's going to be very difficult to get through. And so that's also kind of the talk right now.
Shelby, all the things we're talking about are what former President Clinton, who I also covered, would describe as a world-class problem. They're a problem of governing. And how do you govern? Well, when you're in the majority. The Democrats not in the majority, not governing, and a governor, a California governor, possible candidate in 2028, Gavin Newsom, said this very recently about the Democratic brand.
These guys are crushing us. The Democratic brand is toxic right now. I think with this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground and not take cheap shots.
Toxic.
Yeah, I mean, he was very blunt there. And I think that is sort of the core problem that the Democratic Party has, is they can't agree what the problem is almost, right? We've heard from Senator John Fetterman, who has said similar things, that basically the party needs to change fundamentally. We've heard from Congressman Ro Khanna, who criticized those remarks and said, no, this is not the way to do things. And so there's no core leader in the Democratic Party right now, and there's no core messaging. And you're seeing sort of the fallout from that. You're seeing all of these different Democrats suggest different things and sort of argue over what the fundamental issue of the Democratic Party is and how to move forward with that.
And Reese, when you're on Capitol Hill, what do you hear?
Yeah, I think that a lot of Democrats see this as kind of Gavin Newsom trying to reinvent himself ahead of 2028. I mean, the Democrats, there's...
Quite obviously.
100%. They view this as somewhat,
because he's the one who was first out there with billboards in Texas and Florida.
100%.
Giving the stiff arm to Trumpists, Republicans, MAGA, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And now he's like, no, come to my podcast.
100%. And so they view this as kind of disingenuous, some of them, because, a lot of them do kind of feel that the Democratic Party does have a lot of problems. You're seeing right now with Jeffries refusing
Jeffries, House Minority Leader,
to endorse Schumer, Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, a while back. And then, there's a lot of infighting right now. There are disagreements about where the Democratic Party stands. But a lot of people are kind of rolling their eyes when they're seeing Gavin Newsom doing, especially with Charlie Kirk on his podcast and all this.
And there's a risk with what he's doing also. If you go too far to criticizing the Democratic Party, then you lose Democratic voters.
It might help in the general, but it doesn't matter if you can't get out of a primary. So,
Shelby Talcott, Reese Gorman, always a pleasure. Thanks so much to have you.